Yeah, very good afternoon. Today we are going to discuss about the correlation and regulation topic. These two topics are very important for your examination point of view. And so here we are talking about the correlation. We can say that the relationship, correlation, the word itself, it is showing relationship between two variables. Okay, relationship between two variables. The correlation statistics, it's a reflect and it explains the relationship between two or more variables. We call it as regression. For example, rainfall and yield, price and demand. There is a two variables. One is price and demand, the another. Price is independent variable and demand is dependent variable. When price increases, demand decrease. When price comes down, demand increases. These are the two variables. It explains the relationship between two or more variables. Whether this relationship is positive, whether this relationship it is negative, or between these two variables, no relationship, it explains the correlation. See, when we are now talking about the price and demand, as we know that when price increases, demand decreases, there is an inverse relationship between these two variables. It says that only the relationship, whether positive or negative or no relationship, correlation explains. Coming to the income, instead of price, you take as a income. These two variables, income and demand. When you see, there is a positive relationship between these two. When income increases, demand also increases. When income decrease, demand also decrease or comes down. So there is a positive association between these two variables. We call it as, it explains positive relationship between the two or more variables. If you consider a equation or if you take three or more variables, for example, as we know that the consumption is a function of income. Consumption is depending on the income. Not only income, other factors also, their wealth. Wealth also deciding factor whether increase or decrease of consumption function. Right? Here, three variables are there. If we take demand, there are other factors also influence the demand. Price, as I said, inverse relationship between. Income also influence the demand, positive association. Taste and preferences also influence the demand. These are variables we are including. Okay. And also other commodities prices also include or influence the demand. So here, price, income, other commodities or other goods prices, taste and preferences, technology, these all are variables, independent variables we call it as. So these all are influencing the demand. If we take together, it explains, correlation explains what type of relationship is there, not impact, only the relation, positive relationship or negative association. This correlation explains. See, there are various definitions are there. We can observe. So, uh, according to Cowden and Croxton, there is a definition of correlation. When the relationship is of a quantitative in nature, the appropriate statistical tool known as correlation. So according to Crowden and Cowden, so the relationship between quantitative in nature variables are we are measuring in terms of numerical numbers, that is quantitative. For example, price we can measure in numbers, numerical numbers. Demand, how much demand is there? 20 goods or 30 goods or 15 goods. That also we are measuring in terms of numerical numbers. So the relationship, when the relationship is, quantitative in nature, the appropriate statistical tools are applying to know the relationship between the two or more variables. That we call it as, correlation. Correlation, simply we can say that the relationship between or the correlation show the correlation analysis attempt to determine the degree of relationship between the variables. Degree of variables. That is also called as, correlation. So the correlation analysis of the covariance or covariations between two or more variables, we call it as uh, correlation. Okay. So these are the definitions, or simply we can say that correlation analysis that explains the association between two or more variables. We call it as correlation. Correlation means correlation. So what are the uses from the correlation? Why we want to use this analysis or the correlation? What are the benefits or uses of the correlation? Generally, when we observe the uses from the correlation, it is used to know the degree or we can say that the direction of variables which we consider in the equation, or what are the variables we included in the model. Okay, it explains the direction between the variables or among the variables. Price and demand, there is a negative direction. One increases, another has to decrease. Rainfall and crop yield. If rainfall increase, yield also increase. Positive relationship. So, like consumption and income. When income increases, consumption also increase. Positive relationship, right? So the direction we can identify whether positive or negative among the two or more variables. The another one, it is used to developing the concept of regression and ratio variation, which in turn help the estimation of values of one variable for a given another correlation. Regression ratio for estimating the values of one variable to another, whether they correlated or not, we can easily identify. And the another use of correlation is that it is used in presenting average relationship between two variables through a single variable coefficient of correlation. We can analyze the average of relationship between the two or more variables. Whether uh, considering variables positive association or negative association, we can uh, identify with the help of correlation. Okay. And another important usage of correlation or uses of correlation in the field of economics, it is used to understand the economic behavior and the importance variables and the other, it's depending on the situation. So these are the uses of correlation. Uh, when we are talking about the causation and correlation, it is necessary to identify the correlation. Correlation does not necessarily indicate the cause and effect relationship. This is important part. Correlation does not necessarily to indicate the cause and effect relationship. It cannot explain the cause and effect relationship. Whether the positive or negative relationship it explains, but cause and effect, how much it is affecting or impacting, it cannot explain. So the correlation analysis, it provides only quantitative in nature. The variables must be in numerical numbers. You take n number of examples. If you consider inflation and GDP, GDP is a dependent variable, inflation is independent. Inflation is influencing the GDP. Foreign direct investment and GDP, whether FDI inflows influencing the economic growth or not, we can identify. It explains the relationship, whether positive relationship or negative association, it explains. But it cannot explain the impact, how much it is impacting on the GDP from the FDI side. How much it is influencing, it cannot. That impact cannot explain. Only the relationship between the FDI and GDP, it can explain. Okay? Right. Somebody is asking, is this Indian economy class? No. Quantitative methods class. So here the correlation. So when we are talking about the no types of correlation, there are positive correlation, negative correlation, partial correlation, and simple and multiple correlation, linear and non-linear correlation. There are different types of correlations are there. So positive and negative correlation. Positive are the direction positive or no, the direct correlation refers to the movement of variables in the same direction. That is positive. The both variables, dependent variable and independent variables, are moving together, same direction. That is positive correlation. Income and consumption goes, positive side. Income and demand, this moves together, positive uh, movements. So the correlation is said that it is positive when increase in the value of one variable is accompanied by increase or decrease the other variable. So when the two variables, there is a negative correlation. These two variables are move opposite direction. One positive side, one is negative side. What does it mean? Price increases, it is increasing positive. It is impacting and the demand is negative. It decreasing. One increasing and the another one is decreasing. So the correlation said that there is a negativity or negative correlation. If an increase in the value of a one variable is accompanied by an increase in the value of the other. If x and y variables are there, if x increases, y also increases, that is positive correlation. X and y variables, if x increases, y comes down or decreases, then we say that that is negative correlation. Simple and multiple correlation. Under the simple correlation, the relationship is confirmed two variables. You can say, yield of wheat and chemical fertilizers. These two only. Or between money supply and general price levels. Money supply and general price levels. So here we are considering only two variables. In the case of multiple correlation, the relationship between more than two variables. One is a dependent variable and the other variables are independent. That variables are more than one or more than two. So, for example, for the multiple correlation, yield of wheat is depending upon the pesticides, chemical fertilizers, and pesticides. Pesticides is different, chemical fertilizers are different. If we consider these three, the yield of wheat depending upon the chemical fertilizers and pesticides. Three variables we consider, multiple correlation we can say that. Partial and total correlation. Partial. There are two types of multiple correlation. So under the partial correlation, the relationship of two or more is explained excluding the other variables included for the calculation of total correlation. Linear and non-linear correlation. Linear and non-linear correlation. So when we are talking about this, the correlation or the relationship to the correlation plotted on a graph that gives rise to the straight line. Rise to the straight line. It is a case of correlation or linear correlation. It is upward moving. It is upward moving. That we call it as linear correlation. This is possible only when there is a perfect relationship and the constantly ratio changes between the value of variables. The linear correlation again may be either positive or negative in nature. Accordingly, it may be give either the upward or downward straight line when we plotted as a diagram. So positive linear correlation, it is upward slope. Negative correlation, it is downward slope from left to right. Positive and curvilinear correlation, upward bending, and the negative curvilinear, downward curvy line. So when we observe the correlation, we have seen uh, uses of correlation and the problems of correlation. What are the problems? There are different problems are there when we talk about the correlation. It is detecting the presence of, or what we can say absence of correlation, that is determining the degree and the direction of correlation through the suitable measure of correlation. It is unable to explain the measure of a suitable measure of correlation. Testing the significance of a degree of correlation, it is observed through the various tests of significance, as we can say that. So finding the cause and effect relationship between the variables under the study through the careful and reasonable interactions. This is all about the problems of correlation. Graphic method. Under this method, you know, different methods of studying correlation, graphic and algebraic methods. Graphic method through the diagram, graphical diagram. Under the graphic, scatter or covariance diagram. Coming to the algebraic, rank deviation, concurrent square, least, and product moment differentiations. So, what are the merits of graphical method? When we observe this graphical method, like the diagrammatic method, this method is very, simple or easy to operate, simple to understand or easy to understand the graphic method. Unlike the diagrammatic method, this method can be used for studying both simple and partial and multiple correlation. So when we talk about the demerits of graphic method or graphical method, demerits we are talking. So this method can be, apply for the only the data relating to the variables have common or no, these variables cannot be used in the other cases. That is more important. So this is also one of the drawback. Under this method, you know, we can make only, observation, a rough observation of, the nature of correlation and not exact event of correlation in numerical terms. That is the one of the, drawback. Scatter diagram also there, merits. So particularly this method under the scatter diagram, it indicates the direction of correlation and it tells how it is clearly or closely related to the two or more variables under the study. It also observe to estimate the values of missing. It's depending upon the the value of independent variable, the value of independent variable. So the scatter diagram, it is also useful detecting the abnormal variations. Abnormal variations. So here, the shape of the scatter points, it tells whether the correlation line is curvy line or not. The scatter diagram that enables, or the scatter diagram enables us to obtain the line of best fit by freehand method. Freehand method. Coming to the demerits, when we are talking about from the uh, scatter, it does not provide any exact measure for the extent of relationship between the variables. This method is not applicable for studying partial and multiple regression, partial and multiple regression. So here, this method does not give any idea about the prices that, the relationship. So it cannot be, unable to measure in mathematical treatment. These are the demerits. Algebraic method, when we observe, uh, sorry. So algebraic method. So these methods, based on the mathematical formulas, as we know that algebraic methods, the relationship, that express by coefficient of correlation range plus or minus. So therefore, it can be said that the relationship it is expressed in precise terms that that it has not guessed by visual inspection in the case of graphical method. So The algebraic method having, following the major methods, when we say Carl Pearson, coefficient of correlation, rank correlation of coefficient, and concurrent deviation of method. So coming to the Carl Pearson's coefficient of correlation, it was, developed by Carl Pearson, a great British biometrician. This method is, most widely used in practice. It is denoted by the symbol. It is expressed with, R, small r. So the value of R, the Carl Pearson correlation of coefficient of correlation, we express with small r. So this r, must be between, plus or minus. When the r is equal to 1, it indicates that, perfect positive correlation. If r is equal to 1, we say that it is perfectly positive correlation, positive correlation. If it is, minus 1, opposite of positive, perfect positive correlation, it is -1. R is equal to -1. It indicates that, the perfect negative correlation, perfect negative correlation. So when R is greater than 0, but less than the 1, what we say that it is indicative imperfect positive correlation, imperfect positive correlation. If the R is no less than 0 and but less than -1, this indicates perfect imperfect negative correlation, imperfect negative correlation. So R greater than or less than -1, this indicates the erronic or erroneous results. So if they are greater than equal plus or minus 0.90, it indicates very high degree of correlation, very high degree of correlation. This is all about the Carl Pearson. As I said, if R is equal to +1, perfect correlation. If it is minus, perfect negative correlation. R is equal to 0.90 or more, very high degree of correlation, high degree of correlation. So this is all about the correlation. There are no important topic, that is properties of correlation of coefficient. So when we observe the properties of correlation, the correlation of coefficient lies between -1 and +1. Symbolically, we can say that -1 less than equal or no correlation less than or equal to +1. So the coefficient of correlation is independent of each scale and the origin of the variables x and y. The coefficient of correlation is geometric mean of two regression coefficients. The degree of relationship between two variables is symmetric. There are no some assumptions are there. There is a linear relationship between the variables. No, there is often the cause and effect relationship between forces affecting the distribution of observations in the two series. Correlation is meaningless if no there is no such relationship. There must be a relationship, whether positive or negative. So each of the variable or each of the variable from the series is being affected by a large a number of independent constitutory cases, such as nature of to the produce normal distribution. For instance, when observe the the variables that is related to the age, sometimes weight, height, and supply relating to the price that confirm to this assumption. Each of the variable is being affected by the large number of independent uh, variables included. So what are the merits from this, Carl Pearson? Particularly when we, observe this method, it gives a precise and summary quantitative value, which can be, interpreted in meaningfully. It gives the direction as well as the degree of relationship between the two variables. Degree of the two variables. The coefficient of correlation, along with the other information that helps in estimating the value of dependent variable from the non-variable of an independent variable. When we are talking about the demerits, again, this method assumes that there is a linear relationship between the variables under the regardless of fact whether such relationship existing or not. So compared to the other methods, the the computation of correlation coefficient by this method is time consuming. Calculation is very time consuming process. The value of coefficient is affected by the extreme items, that is also. And the correlation maybe gives misleading picture of the in the context of relationships between the variables if the data not reasonably homogeneous, not reasonably homogeneous. This is about all about correlation coefficient. What are the merits and demerits of Carl Pearson? So here the another one is rank method or rank correlation coefficient. This method is finding out by covariability or the lack of it between two or more variables was developed by the British psychologist Charles Edward Spearman in 1904. So this measure, especially useful when the quantitative measures of certain factors are included. Features of Spearman correlation coefficient, what are the characteristics or features? The sum of the differences of no correlation between two variables shall be zero. And the another Spearman correlation coefficient is distribution free for the non-parametrics, and due to a strict assumption that are made about from the particular population from the sample observations drawn. And also, the Spearman correlation coefficient is nothing but the correlation coefficient between the ranks. So here, when we observe, the rank are given. If we give ranks, how to calculate? We need to take the differentiation of two ranks. So the differences by the D. So assuming that uh, the square where ranks are given, as I said, where ranks are not given, we can calculate the Spearman coefficient of our correlation. So here, this is all about the correlation. Another concept when we observe the here is analysis of regression. This is very important topic. The literal meaning or actual meaning of regression is moving backward, going back, or stepping down. The term regression was first used by British biometrician Francis Galton in 1877. Francis Galton, 1877, he was used. The term, when we talk about the regression, explain the relationship between the height of the fathers and the sons. Explain the relationship between the heights of the fathers and sons. He used this term, the regression, for the first time in his paper, Regression Towards Military, in a particular nature. Regression towards a mediatory in hereditary of nature. So we need to observe here the further, as I said, fathers and sons. The tall father, when will have to haul. So here, what I'm trying to tell you, the regression, it explains the relationship, or we can say that regression analysis is a mathematical measure of average relationship between two or more variables in terms of original units of the data. Here we are trying to measure the cause and effect relationship in this regression. Here we are trying to give cause and effect relationship. Impact relationship also explains this regression analysis. There are again various definitions are there. There are different, uh, definitions are there. Regression analysis is a mathematical measure of average relationship between two or more variables in terms of original units of the data. According to Maurice Humber, the term regression analysis refers to the methods by which estimates are made the values of variable from knowledge of the values of one or more variables and the measurement of the errors involved in the estimation of the process. So this is all about the regression. So what are the characteristics of regression analysis? If we observe, you know, it consists the mathematical devices that are used to measure the average relationship of two or more variables related to the variables which are closely related. So it is used for estimating the unknown value of some dependent variable with reference to the known values that are related to the independent variable that is related to independent variable. So it provides the mechanism for the prediction or forecasting of the values of one variable in terms of other variables. It also consisting of two lines of equation, that is equation x on y and equation y on x. So when we observe this correlation and regression analysis, regression is analyzing or explaining the impact or cause and effect relationship, as I said. But when we observe these two, correlation and regression, correlation literally means the relationship between two or more variables, which may vary. One tends to be, accompanied by the corresponding movements of the others. Regression means the stepping back or returning to the average value. That is, it expresses the average relationship between two or more variables. So regression can analyze the impact of the two variables. How much influences one variable to another? We can identify from the regression. Correlation need not imply the cause and effect relationship between the variable under the study. Coming to the regression analysis, the regression analysis, it is clearly indicates that cause and effect relationship. So the variable constructing the cause and effect as taken as independent variable. The variable constructing the effect is taken as a dependent variable. Cause and effect. Cause is independent variable. Effect is dependent variable. So cause is the price. Effect is the demand. So regression can explain the cause and effect relationship. How much influence on demand if 1% or 100% increase in the price of a particular commodity, how much it is influencing on the demand side, that regression can, through the regression, we can analyze. Coming to the correlation, it may be cause of nonsense or spurious correlation. There is a chance to get. Coming to the regression, there is nothing like nonsense regression, because these are the from the variables it is getting accurate results. And some sort of mutual dependency there. It is immaterial whether y is equal to a function of x or x is equal to function of y, right? So here there is nothing like nonsense regression, and it is establishes the functional relationship, mathematical relationship. It is depending upon one variable to the another variable, depending upon one variable to another variable. So, the dependent variable, which is it is depending on the independent variable. But when you are talking about the regression side, the value of independent variables, it also reflects in the nature of variable, which is dependent variable and which is independent variable. Correlation coefficient is a measure of linear relationship between x and y, independent of the unit of measurement. Coming to the regression analysis, the regression analysis, it is coefficient of absolute measure of representing the change in the value of the variables. Once the function or the functional form of regression curve is known by substituting the value of dependent variable. So here the correlation analysis has limited applications. It is confined only to the study of linear relationship between the variables. That is about the correlation. Coming to the regression analysis, it studies the linear as well as non-linear relationship between the variable, and therefore uh, it can be much wider application. We can say that regression can be. The types of regression again, simple and multiple regression is there, linear and non-linear regression is there, total and partial regression is there. Linear or multiple regression model. Simply we can say that this linear, the variables are moving same direction. That is related to linear. When we are talking about the simple regression, the regression analysis where only two variables are there in the model. Okay, only two variables are there in the model. Uh, if you consider demand and price, only two variables are there. Advertisement expenditure and sales. If the firm spends more on advertisement, maybe their sales may be increased due to advertisements. Because through the advertisements, they try to, promote their products in TV channel, and that advertisement may be, pamphlet or newspaper. Okay. What will happen? There is a chance to increase their product. Sales may increase, right? So when there is a one dependent variable and one independent variable, we call it as simple regression analysis. If the variables more than two, we can say that, multiple regression. A regression analysis, on the other side, uh, as I said, more than two variables. Okay, that may be, sales, prices, income of the people. This we can consider three variables are there. So in such cases, the value of one variable, say sales are estimated on the basis of other remaining variables, say price of goods and income of the consumers. One variable, made dependent on the other variable, that is independent variable. Linear and non-linear regression analysis also there. Partial and total regression also there. The methods again, studying the regression analysis through a graphical scatter diagram, three-dimensional regression equation through normal equation. These are the methods. So regression, through the regression we can apply or we can analyze the impact of two or more variables. The cause and effect relationship also we can identify from this method, from this method, from this regression analysis. This is very useful because it goes through the overall mean of variable. It gives the best fit of the data, that because of some of these cutter deviations from the line smaller than they would be from the other straight line. So when we talking about the properties of regression coefficients, the geometric mean of these two regression coefficients, that gives the coefficient of correlation, both the regression coefficients that must be same algebraic sign, both of them either plus or minus sign, that we can observe. The nature of the regression coefficient that reflect in the nature of the coefficient of correlation. This this means the regression coefficients are positive correlation. The coefficient will be positive. The correlation coefficient is negative. Then the correlation coefficient will be negative. So this is all about the regression and correlation. What are the uses of regression analysis? This regression analysis, it provides functional relationship between two or more variables. One can easily estimate, one can easily predict the unknown values of one variable from the known values of the another variable. We can estimate easily, we can predict easily. So based on that results, we can policymakers maybe take decisions based on the results. It provides the measure of errors and that try to made these estimates made through the regression lines. So this regression analysis may be provide a degree of coefficient of correlation between two variables that may be calculated by taking a square root of product of the two regression coefficients. This provides the valuable tools for measuring, estimating the cause and effect relationship among the economic variables. So regression analysis is more useful for estimating the either demand, supply, or production side, cost side, consumption side, investment side, we can easily estimate this. Okay. So this is all about the uh, uses of regression. There are limitations also there. When we talk about the limitations, it assumed that the cause and effect relationship between the variables remaining unchanged. Functional relationship established between two or more variables, but you know what happened? On the basis of some limited data may not be hold a good results, right? That is also. And also it involves very lengthy and complicated procedure for the calculations of the data analysis. And you know, it can be used while analyzing the quantitative or qualitative phenomena. It is more helpful for the quantitative, but coming to the qualitative, honesty, crime, it cannot be used for the uh, qualitative data. This is all about the correlation and regression. So I'm going to close now.